This is like the video of how many animals can invade my space. Hi, hello, I am Alexis, or For Loving the Words, which will be somewhere on the screen, but I haven't decided where yet. So let's pretend I'm pointing to wherever I put it. Today is March 1st, and I wanted to do my February reading wrap-up. So that is what we're here today to do. I read 9 books in February, and I had really hoped I would read 10. But here we are at 9, and I am happy with it. Right. Okay. I suppose I could have been more prepared. The first book that I read is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer? Kluwer? I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. But this is a horror book, and horror did it do. Everyone was talking about this book, and there are very few books that have genuinely scared me, or I felt like I needed to read with the lights on. And this is one of them. This is definitely one of them. All you need to know going into this book is that this couple acquires this house, and their plan is to flip the house to sell it. This family shows up at the door and says, "Hey, we used to live here. Mind if we take a look around?" And that's where everything goes wrong. This book almost makes you question if you're crazy or the characters are crazy. And it is a little like multimedia too, which was really interesting throughout the book. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give anything away, but I gave this 4 stars, and it is a very, very great horror book. I think that it lost a star for me because of the whole like questioning if I'm crazy factor. Like I said, I can't really say too much because I don't want to ruin it for anyone else. Maybe if you know, you know. I don't know. Maybe I'm the odd one out here. I know that a lot of people have been giving this book 5 stars. And honestly, I think it's warranted. Like, I think I can understand why it got such mass approval. So that is the first book that I read for February. I decided that the month of love should be filled with fear. The second book that I read in February is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And I read this for Kayla at Books and Lala's, the Literally Dead Book Club. I definitely think that other Grady Hendrix books, for example, like the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, is still easily my favorite Grady Hendrix book. Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix is certainly less horror than I would say that We Used to Live Here was. What I can say is that Grady Hendrix is truly a storyteller. He just embodies the atmosphere that he wants the reader to take from his books. And this is no different. We are following a girl, Fern, in the 70s, and as she is sent off to this home for wayward girls. And basically, this home is where pregnant teens go. They are shipped off by their families and sent there to have their children, give their children up for adoption, and then they can come home and pretend like nothing happened. Like they were caring for a sick relative or away at some camp. And at the very least, I think all of Grady Hendrix's books take place in a different time period than our present time period. And I think that's also what I mean in regards to him embodying that atmosphere. You feel like you are in the 70s. My Best Friend's Exorcism, I think, is the 80s. You are in the 80s. But you are you are thrown full speed ahead into the era that Grady Hendrix is writing about. And I enjoyed this, but I will say that in terms of this book felt a little long at times, and I found myself wanting more horror. I found myself waiting for more chaos to erupt. There were points in this book that were a little like, okay, well, that's happening. But overall, I definitely don't think that this kind of lands up there with the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. But I had a good time overall reading it, and I do think that it's a very valuable read overall. So that is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. The third book that I read in February is Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yembow? Yembow. That feels right. If I'm mispronouncing it, I greatly apologize. There's going to be so much editing. I went back and forth on my rating for this book because I kept trying to decipher if it was a 3.75 or a 4-star or where it kind of fell. And I have settled on a 4-star. I enjoyed this so much more than I thought that I was going to. There's a lot of the magic in here I found to be unexplained. And normally I would say that wouldn't work. And for some reason, it worked here. This is a pretty short book, and we're following Hannah as she takes over the tea shop from her father, and it's a tea shop, pawn shop, where you go to sell your regrets. This book is a fantasy, magical realism, and it's so hard to talk about because as much as this is about Hannah and this stranger that stumbles in to help her when her father goes missing, it is also about so much more than just that. And I think that there's a lot of symbolic things kind of taking place. I think that there's a sense of coming of age. There's a sense of kind of being okay with the unknown or being okay with your regrets. There is a lot of things packed into 384 pages. I genuinely liked this more than I thought that I would. And I think that even though there are parts that are left kind of vague, the magic system, all of the parts that we don't understand about it almost draw you in more. And I found myself just constantly thinking about this book even after I put it down. So I greatly enjoyed this and I gave it 4 stars, and I am very excited to see other books by this author. The fourth book that I read in the month of February, I read on my Kindle, so I will put a little picture of the cover up. But that is What It's Like in Words by Eliza Moss. Now, this book is a literary fiction, contemporary fiction, and this focuses very heavily on an abusive relationship. This book is an emotional roller coaster. There were so many times throughout this book where I wanted to climb into my Kindle and just shake our main character. But I think that is exactly what Eliza Moss intended. And not only are we focusing on relationships from the romantic perspective, but we're also focusing a lot on relationships from a familial standpoint, from friendships. Enola honestly is going through a lot throughout the whole book. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I can appreciate what the intention was regarding abusive relationships. What I really struggled with in this book was actually the writing. Throughout the book, there are conversations that are being had that there's no dialogue. It's very much like so-and-so said this and so-and-so said this, and then I said this, and then but there's no quotations. There's no literal dialogue, which is very confusing to read. And around the 75-80% mark, I was getting very frustrated and I considered DNFing it. We read fiction to escape reality. Now, this book takes place in a different country, and American politics, all of a sudden around that point, became a very heavy topic. And I'm not saying that politics are not an important topic for that should and can be in literature, but I found it very interesting that these characters who don't even live here had such vast opinions on our politics when they hadn't throughout the entire first half of the story. So that was a little confusing to me. And again, the writing was very scattered at times. Every animal is trying to join us in the camera. So if you see them, please disregard. That is the fourth book. The fifth book that I read in the month of February is Normal People by Sally Rooney. And this is also a contemporary literary fiction. And this is obviously a very beloved book across many platforms and for many years. I understand, but I also don't. I ended up giving this 2.75 stars. I think that this book is diagnosed with the overhype syndrome. I can really, really, really appreciate Sally Rooney's writing. I think that her writing at times is beautiful in the way that she explains things. You can feel what she's writing. But I also don't really believe that much happened in this book. We follow years of time with these two people, and we go through all of these different things with these two people. I think that a very big underlying topic that is being discussed here is how we perceive ourselves and how others perceive us, or how others perceive our choices. And for that, I think that Sally Rooney does a great job. I think that this idea that, am I making choices based on how others are going to react, or am I making choices based on what I want, is a very valid and very important thing that she discusses. However, between these two characters and the fact that this technically isn't considered a romance book is confusing, because we follow such a long period of time, but nothing really happens. You gain more from the writing and the like kind of subtopics of this story than you really do from the actual plot, if that makes any sense. So I ended up giving this 2.75 stars. I don't think it's a bad book by any means, but it's definitely not what I anticipated based on what everyone had been talking about. And the sixth book that I read in February is From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Keough. Now, this is a memoir. I'm going to put it up here. I ended up giving this 3 stars, and I feel like I'm really only giving it 3 stars because I wanted more. Now, I understand that with Lisa Marie Presley's passing, Riley kind of took over completing this book, and I think that there are great things in here from Lisa Marie herself, and then you get the little anecdotes of what Riley adds to the story from her perspective or from her understanding of a specific situation. I kind of almost wish that we had gotten more from Riley than we did, but I also understand why we didn't. I know that Riley wanted to complete what her mom started and wanted it to be what was intended. So I appreciate this story, and I definitely learned things about Lisa Marie, Elvis, Riley, about all of them that I hadn't quite had a full understanding of before. So I can appreciate this for what it was, but I certainly found myself really wanting more. The 7th book that I read for the month of February is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. Now, this is a mystery thriller, and I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. This is a very fun mystery thriller. I don't think that this breaks any mold for what you expect of a mystery thriller, but I also don't think that this is something that I've read before, if that makes any sense. I think this is fun. This is a very quick read. I certainly didn't see the full plot twists coming, but I definitely predicted little bits and pieces of the bigger picture. But overall, I had a very fun time, and I find that this book would be very easily recommendable. If you're looking for a quick mystery thriller, this is definitely a good one to pick up. We are following 3 siblings whose mother is in hospice passing, and they uncover some secrets on some videotapes, and then they are spiraling to try and figure out how their parents were involved with what was on the tape. In following them, we actually got different perspectives from each of the siblings, and I really enjoyed the way that Geneva Rose wrote this. So I think that definitely helped in this not feeling like something I had read before, because we got all of the siblings' perspectives. I had a good time. I wouldn't say that it was, like I said, anything groundbreaking for a mystery thriller, but I definitely really enjoyed this, and I think that it is very recommendable. The 8th book that I read in the month of February is Super Communicators: How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection by Charles Duhigg. This is another nonfiction. I'm not really sure how I got on this memoir nonfiction kick, but here we are, and we're going to roll with it, okay? This book, I'm not sure what I anticipated this book being. I kind of thought that it would be very much like you should be an extrovert and you should talk to all sorts of different people, or a public speaking kind of how to be comfortable speaking in public situations. And it was neither of those things. What it actually was really came down to understanding the different types of conversations that we have and asking yourself questions in conversations to ultimately have better, more meaningful, more deeper connections with the people that you're having these conversations with. I absolutely loved this book, and I ended up giving it 5 stars, which if you would have told me I was going to give a nonfiction a 5-star even in January, I would have been like, really? We're going to do that? And not that there's not amazing 5-star fiction or nonfiction out there, but this is definitely out of my normal realm of reading. And I absolutely loved how this made me think. I was thinking back to conversations that I've had that may have not gone as well as they could have had these concepts been implemented into the conversations. And you experience him explaining all of these things through different real people explaining. He narrates the book himself, but he uses different people in different settings to explain how what he has discovered in communicating would make for better communication. How many times can I say communicate in 3 sentences? A lot. I really enjoyed this, and I think that this is a book that so many people could benefit from. I think that there is a lot to be said for, we are so used to communicating that we don't maybe necessarily think about how and why we say what we say, or what our conversations necessarily mean. And this really changes the way that you kind of think about the conversations that you're having. So 5 stars. I very much enjoyed this. And the last book, number 9 for the month of February, is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is a cozy fantasy, and I enjoyed this more than I thought that I would. I think I ended up giving it 3.5, 3.75, but I honestly don't remember. And for some reason, it's not written down in my little reading journal. So I'll put it on the screen when I go back and check what I put on Goodreads. um, I enjoyed this more than I thought that I would because cozy fantasy to me can sometimes feels just like middle grade fantasy, and I can appreciate middle grade fantasy for what it is, but I also don't have much experience with adult cozy fantasy, so I think that finding that like happy middle ground is something that I'm still learning and exploring myself. But this was a very fun read. I think it was also a very quick read. And Viv and Tandri and just going through all of these people kind of experiencing coffee for the first time was a very fun part of the book. But I found myself more intrigued with some of the side characters than the main characters. The uh, contractor, I suppose you could call him, I'm not sure. I think his name is Cal. Um, I really liked his character, but he doesn't play a very major role in the story either. And then the baker, I think his name is Fimble. Um, I wanted more. I wanted more of the contractor and more of the baker. And I understand that they are not supposed to be the main characters. I certainly found myself a little more invested in in their parts of the book than I did in the main plot line of the book, even though it was rather minimal to the main characters, which is why I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. But again, I might be wrong. I might have given it higher than that. But if that's the case, we're going to give it 3.5 stars right here, right now. That's where I've landed. So I think that this is definitely a very cozy book to read, and I definitely think that there's a large group of people that have really enjoyed this, and I can understand that, and I definitely think that this book would be very good for people that don't want something that's incredibly high stakes, but still wants that fantasy element and the romantic element and all of those things. So this was fun, and it was a great way to end my February reading. So those are the 9 books that I read in February, and let's see how many I read in March. Bye!